You know, when you think about quitting a job, you probably think of it as your choice, right? You're deciding to move on. But what if it's not a choice? What if the situation is so bad you feel like you're being forced out? Today, we're diving into this really fascinating legal idea where an employee resigning is actually treated like they were fired.
Imagine getting this message from an employee. If I kill myself, it is on you guys. That's the actual chilling message a senior project officer at Services Australia sent to his manager. It's just a raw cry for help from someone right on the edge. You can just feel the absolute desperation in those words.
And here's where the story takes a turn that just doesn't seem to make sense. Weeks after sending that message, he quit. He resigned. But then he ended up winning over 33 grand for unfair dismissal. So how on earth is that possible? How can you quit your job and then claim you were fired unfairly? Well, let's get into it.
To really get why the court ruled the way it did, you first have to understand the guy at the center of all this, Luke Wilson. Because his story isn't about some employee who was always causing trouble. No, it's the story of a rising star who had a sudden and really dramatic fall from grace.
When Luke Wilson started at Services Australia, by all accounts, he was a fantastic employee. He was good at what he did, he was killing it after he got transferred, and the company noticed. They quickly gave him more responsibility and a promotion. The guy was clearly on his way up.
What's so shocking here is just how fast everything fell apart. I mean, look at this timeline. In November 2024, he gets that big promotion. Just 2 months later, in January, he's described as being in a distressed and panicked state. By February, a doctor says he has zero capacity for work. And by March, he's gone. He resigns. To go from a top performer to completely out the door in just a few months, you have to ask, what could possibly cause a collapse like that?
Well, according to Wilson, the workplace basically became impossible to survive in. He claimed there was a serious mold problem that was making him physically sick. On top of that, he said he was being bullied and felt totally abandoned by his managers, especially after a run-in with another employee. You can see his mental health just spiraling in his messages. We're talking 36 calls and 24 texts in just 6 weeks, just trying to get help as the pressure kept building.
So, Wilson finally quits, and he lays out this whole list of problems in his resignation. Now, for most people, that would be the end of the story. But Wilson's resignation wasn't an ending. It was actually the beginning of a legal battle, and it was all built around one powerful idea.
And this right here is the key to understanding everything. It's a legal concept called constructive dismissal. Basically, it means the boss doesn't come out and say you're fired. Instead, their actions, or maybe their lack of action, make the workplace so toxic, so unbearable, that any reasonable person would feel like they have no other choice but to leave. And in the eyes of the law, that's the same as being terminated.
So his resignation letter wasn't just a simple, "I'm out of here." Nope. It was a 10-point laundry list of all his issues. He was building his case right then and there, arguing that all these things, especially being pressured to meet with managers while a doctor had certified him as unfit for work, left him with absolutely no other option but to resign.
So when this all got to the Fair Work Commission, you basically had two totally different stories. Wilson's side said, "They forced me out." Services Australia's side said, "No way, he left on his own, his behavior was the real problem, and besides, his claim is technically invalid." It was a classic he said, they said situation.
So you've got two completely conflicting arguments. How did the commission see it? Let's get to the verdict.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. The commission didn't just ignore Wilson's frantic calls and texts. They actually called his behavior difficult and irrational. But, and this is a huge but, they looked past the behavior and tried to understand the cause. They decided he was under so much emotional stress that his resignation wasn't really a conscious, voluntary choice.
And here is the absolute key to their decision. The commission ruled that the employer's actions, specifically continuing to contact him while he was on medical leave, actually made a terrible situation even worse. The company should have just given him space. By not doing that, they unwittingly exacerbated his condition. They basically pushed him closer and closer to the breaking point.
And that whole line of reasoning led to this number. The commission ordered Services Australia to pay Luke Wilson over $33,000. They officially ruled that his resignation was a constructive dismissal and that it was harsh and unfair. Okay, so the Luke Wilson story is pretty dramatic, for sure. But it's more than just one person's crazy case. It actually teaches us some really important lessons. whether you're an employee or a manager. So let's break down what this all means for you. So how does a court even begin to figure this out? Well, they have a kind of test, and it really boils down to 3 questions. First, was the resignation actually a voluntary choice? Or was the person under so much stress, like Wilson, that they couldn't really think clearly? Second, did the company's behavior, even if they didn't mean to, lead directly to the person quitting? And finally, the big one, was the employee left with any other reasonable choice, or was quitting truly the only way out?
So if you take one thing away from this whole story, let it be this. A resignation letter is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for a bad employer. Companies have a duty of care, and if their actions push an employee to the brink, that resignation letter can flip around and become the most powerful piece of evidence against them.
And that really leaves us all with a pretty important question to think about. I mean, we all have bad days at work, right? Maybe even a bad month. But this case shines a huge spotlight on a critical line. It's the line between deciding it's time to find something new and being pushed so far into a corner that you feel like you have no choice at all. And that's a line everyone should know how to spot.